You're listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Trisha Gardner.
So welcome to the show. This week we got Kristy Arnett of Poker News fame, and she also has a podcast now coming on the show to talk about being a professional poker player and her work in the media. So Trisha, what do you have for us this week?
Hey, I got something that is going to help everybody who wants to start exercising, or really you could use this for anything. The British Journal of Health Psychology did a study, and what they were looking at is how frequently people exercised over a 2-week period. Now, you may say, oh, who cares? But what really makes this interesting is there was one little trick that one group used, and it got them like major, massive results. So what they did is they divided it into 3 groups. So group 1 was a control group, and they were just told, keep track of how often you exercise for the next 2 weeks. Then the next group was what they call a motivation group. And for this group, they were also asked to keep track of how frequently they exercised, but they were told to read this pamphlet about the benefits of exercise. And then they were told, that most people who exercise, find it very effective in reducing chances of heart disease, right? So this is supposed to motivate you. Group 3 was what they called the intention group. So then they were told, track your exercise, and they read, the motivational pamphlet and got the speech. But then they got this extra thing, which was they had to complete the following statement, which was, during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on the day, at time of day, and where they were going to do it. So this is where it gets really interesting. The point of the study is to see which makes the bigger difference, your motivation or your intention. So the control group and the motivation group, they were practically the same. About a third of them exercised at least once a week. But the intention group that did the statement where they said they were going to exercise on a certain day at a specific time and where, 91% of those participants exercised at least once a week. So basically, writing down a plan that says when and where you're going to do the exercise or any other habit that you want to do, it massively improves the chances that you will actually follow through on your behavior.
So all my clients out there, when I make you write those schedules, there's a reason for it.
Yes, he's not just being a taskmaster.
No, there is some rationale behind
That's
these written
exactly
schedules.
right.
Okay, so let's give Kristy a call. So Kristy, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And I am Kristy Arnett. I have been playing poker professionally for the last 3 to 4 years, but I've been in the industry for over a decade as a writer and producer and video host. And now I'm currently just really passionate about emotional intelligence and being a coach in that area. And so I've really just taken my love for games and risk-taking and applied that to how we get results in our life. And so I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. It's like you've come full circle and you've done all sorts of things. But in order to help our audience get to know you a little better, I like to go back a little bit. So how did you initially get into the industry in the first place?
Well, I have always been hyper competitive and not really a good loser either. And when I was in college, I played Division I soccer for Indiana Purdue of Fort Wayne, and I was always looking to compete in any way that I could. And one thing that was becoming very popular in, about 2003, 2002, 2004, in that time was poker. Moneymaker was blowing up in that time. And while most people got introduced to it, by starting online at the time with Moneymaker saying, I just satellited into this main event, turned it into millions. A lot of people started online, but what I did was started playing with my fellow collegiate athletes, mostly the baseball boys. They were playing $5 sit and goes, and I wanted to compete with them. And so I started just playing these little home games with my friends. And then it started to become such a passion of mine. And I also met a really cute boy who is now my husband, who played. as well professionally. One of the first, I didn't even know you could do it professionally until I met him, and he was doing it in Fort Wayne. And so we kind of ran around together in the underground games in Indiana. And then I moved to Las Vegas in 2006 and started as an intern for Card Player Magazine, writing and hosting videos, interviewing poker players. And at the time, I was such a little fangirl. I remember Daniel Negreanu meeting him for the first time and just being like, "Oh my gosh, Daniel, I'm so happy to meet you." And by then, I'd been working for Card Player for like maybe 3 months. And he was like, "Oh, you're the girl with the white girl last name." And I was like, "Huh?" And so, I've been working in the industry for the past 10 years and just loving it.
Well, have you gotten over the fangirl thing, or are there still people who kind of get you to, get a little overexcited?
Well, fortunately for me, I really, over the past, decade, have been able to interview the best poker players in the world. And what I learned was they're just regular people. They want the same things as I do. They're pursuing the same things. They have the same fears as me. So, the starstruckness has gone away, but I still truly admire and have so much respect for anybody who's great in anything.
And when did you make that move where you became a professional yourself? You mentioned you've been playing professionally for the last few years. What happened there?
So after I worked for Card Player for 4 years, I then moved to Poker News for another 4. And what I really noticed was I wasn't growing anymore. And there was always a burning desire throughout the whole time I'd been reporting for poker to play. And I had supplemented my income for the past years. And when I decided that there was nothing really left for me to report on as a poker reporter, like I'd interviewed all the players, I'd written all the stories, I'd done all the nerdy, niche videos that I could possibly think of, that I was ready for something new. And not knowing whether that was going to be poker forever, or if it was, writing a book, because I've always been a writer as well, or whether it was doing something in health and fitness. I wasn't really sure, but what I did know was that I could use poker as a way to, make money, as a way to find freedom in my time and to cultivate my other passions. And I actually have, for the past 3 years, since becoming a professional and using that as my sole source of income, used it as a way to become a better person. And it felt kind of weird at first to say, you know what, right now, while I'm playing poker for a living, I'm going to see if I can use this to become a better person. I didn't realize how big that would become, and how much, as most all of us professional poker players say and comment on, is how much life is really a reflection, and poker is such a microcosm for life. In one particular session, you can be in a roller coaster, and I know you guys coach on this so much because mindset is such a huge part of this, and being able to handle the ups and downs, to not be a victim to circumstance, and to dig deep and just be present with what is and move forward from there. And those skills translate so perfectly into every aspect of life that playing professionally has really been such an amazing resource for my growth as a human. So when I decided to do that 3 years ago, I had no idea that was going to eventually lead me to what my passion is now, and to have them both, poker and life coaching, be such an intertwined pursuit.
So tell us a little bit about like the podcast that you're doing now, because it really kind of dovetails into everything you're talking about.
It's funny. After, once I decided that poker reporting there was nothing left for me to do there, I was asking myself, what the F am I doing with my life? And I've asked myself that a few times over the course of my life, mostly in pivotal moments or or even dark times where I had no idea the direction that I wanted my life to go. And I noticed that whenever I said this to myself, all my friends would say, I know, right? Like, what are we doing with our lives? And I recognize lots of poker players saying that to themselves whenever they felt like they weren't sure if they wanted to continue playing for a living, or if they should quit their regular day job and play. So when I wanted to do something creative, I decided that podcasting, which, I used to do a poker podcast for Poker News, and I just decided that that's what I would call it, and have it be an exploration into personal development and emotional intelligence and spiritual growth and risk taking. So that's what I've been really focused on, and it's amazing because, and this is something I'm sure you guys coach on as well, is what is our relationship to risk, and how has that either held us back? How has that cultivated maybe some tilt issues or blow ups at the table or in life, or sabotaging? And the feedback I've gotten from the podcast has been amazing, but that's what I'm super passionate about at the moment. Yeah.
And what did you feel was the main takeaway from the poker that you've taken into this new part of your life? So was it the self-sabotage, or was it sort of understanding how to deal with the upswings and downswings? Like, where do you feel that it really helped you?
Well, there's been so many lessons, but I think the risk-taking part was the biggest. And so if I'm just relating it to poker and then to life, which is that, like, we all have a different relationship with risk. And playing poker in itself is a risk, right? We are sitting down with a certain amount of money, or we've put up a certain amount of money in a tournament, and we are risking what's in front of us. And at some point along our path of a player, we aren't really risking anymore, either because the stakes aren't risky for us, or we become so comfortable with where we're at. Maybe we've gotten to an hourly that has over time been sustainable and something that we are comfortable with, and we're not growing anymore. And always taking a look at, are we risking at a rate that helps us grow, and that we are continuing to improve as a player, and not just staying within our comfort zone. And it's often just like this very weird, like, misconception of where we're at in our risk taking if we don't stop and take a step back. And I think that in life I have done that a lot as well, which, I want to always be pushing myself and risking. And what I noticed is, even in my podcast, some people would say, oh, you launched a podcast, that's super risky, that's good for you. But others who know me would say, it's not that risky. You know how to launch a podcast. But what's risky is asking for interviews where people might say no, instead of just asking for people who will say yes. And so it's the same thing with poker. People might be saying that I'm risking by playing, 5-10 sometimes. But the truth is, the real risk taking for me would be asking someone who I know is better at poker than me for advice on a hand, because it's scary, because, like, oh, I don't want them to think I'm bad, or I don't want them to think certain things about me. And so it's just really learning what actual risk taking is, the things that we're afraid of, the places that we're not going, the places that are uncomfortable for us, and having something that's more important pushing us to ask those questions. And in poker and in life, it's always a vision, like, what I ask myself all the time with is, what am I using poker for? What is my vision as a poker player? What do I want to make this year? What do I want to do? And am I taking the risks that it takes to achieve that goal or to live that vision? And do I see it as possible? And it's the same thing for lots of things in life. Like, what do I see for my podcast? Do I want to have 50,000 listeners or 100,000 subscribers? And am I risking and pursuing that in a way that gets me there? So, yeah, risk taking. And then like in your coaching, do you ever find that the poker players that you're coaching, they think they're risking, but they're really not?
All the time.
It varies. I mean, because there is the polar opposite to this as well, and that's when people are taking risks quite clearly they shouldn't be taking.
Right.
Which, I mean, I definitely, as many people who are keeping themselves safe and playing, for an hourly and perhaps not growing in the way that they should, I definitely also see other people who are taking shots in games where, I mean, it just doesn't make sense with the bankroll that they have, and that they're not necessarily sensible risks to take. So I think definitely there's sort of a trade-off here where there's the perfect sort of line to take, and then everyone's trying to get close to it. But I've definitely seen, I've definitely seen people being far too risk averse. And then the other side of things, I mean, I've also definitely seen, when I'll talk through what games are people playing and why and how's their year looked and things. And yeah, the other side of risk taking happens in poker a lot as well.
You know what I think is super interesting is this idea around vision. And I wrote about it in Peak Poker Performance as like the first, main course chapter, because I see that most people don't really have an overall vision. And if you don't have the overall vision, my perspective is that, nothing else kind of lines up. And so I'm kind of wondering if you've noticed that as well. Like, what percentage of people that you run into would you say, haven't even really thought that much about a vision?
Yeah, it's crazy because, and actually this probably relates to what Elliot was saying, which is that like if someone had a vision for moving up, well, does risking half your stat or your role, is that in line with your vision? Because that's not. But that question is super interesting because a lot of times I'll ask people, what is your vision? Where are you going? Like, what's the direction that you're? And sometimes, most of the time, actually, people don't have one, or they're like, well, you know what? I actually don't know. And what I've found is that if we don't have direction or a vision, we're just drifting. We're just like going wherever the wind takes us. And that's particularly dangerous in poker, but also in life, because I don't think we ever just drift to a place that we want to be. Like, we're not just going to drift to playing the highest stakes that we've ever played and winning at them. Like, it's going to take some committed action and purpose and intention. It's not just like, oh, we're just going to like be there one day.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting trying to work out how to find that sweet spot with all of this, because like you say, the drifting is such a danger for people. And also, I think what happens is people fall behind the curve when they're playing poker and they're comfortable at a certain stake. The studying tends to stop. The bad habits tend to kick in because they get so used to beating a stake comfortably that a lot of the things that help them get to that stake originally, start to fall away. Is that something you've seen in your career, Kristy?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that not only do we fall behind if we're not growing, but I think that's when we lose passion for anything. And it certainly was true for me with poker, being in poker and being a player for over a decade. And it's what I learned when I really applied myself as a professional player, which is that everything is so much more exciting. It's so much more fun when we're improving. And what I noticed too is that when we invest in ourselves, invest in a coach, a mindset coach like you guys, or invest in a strategic coach, whether it's poker or in life or whatever, it gets exciting because once you have results or once you have an aha moment, those are things that rekindle the fire for whatever it is that you are applying yourself for. That's what in my experience, and that's what I've seen in so many people, and especially poker players that had been stagnant for a while. All of a sudden they have a session with a coach and they're like, holy crap, like I just did this thing and then this thing happened and it was awesome. So not only is it good for your bottom line, but it's good for your like life, you know?
But I always say poker is a great metaphor for life, and it just, the stuff you're bringing up just solidifies that or reinforces that idea in my mind even more. But just to change gears just a little bit, I want to talk or have you talk a little bit about being a woman in poker and kind of where you see poker evolving as far as, bringing more women into the game and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's such an interesting aspect of the game that we have all tried to talk about and decipher and are ladies events good for poker? Are they not good for poker? Do we need them even? And for the future of the game, it is essential that women feel invited, that they feel comfortable, and that there are resources for women in the game. And I can speak for myself when I say that poker is not just it's not just as welcoming and awesome and just like perfectly able for women who haven't played before to join. I mean, they're like sitting at a casino with a table full of men can be intimidating, and I don't think that's like a sexist or weird thing to say, because it's something that just exists, and I think it obviously exists in other places of the world. And I would say that it is a woman's responsibility to be, if they are fearful, to do it anyway and figure out how to be the best that they can be in poker. But I just think that women have the capabilities to be the greatest players in the world. I mean, I've interviewed so many of the greatest men poker players in the world, the Daniel Negreanu's, the Phil Ivies, and all of them say that what it requires to be a great player is, mental strength, tenacity, being humble, and always in being a student of the game. And I think those are characteristics that women inherently have, that, in general, of course, not everyone, but in general, I think that women just really have the capability, and it really will be the future of the game if we can make sort of a place for women to excel and succeed.
Yeah, I think, you're bringing up some like really good points. And we've kind of seen, over the last few years, maybe the games, at least if you look at the numbers at some of the live events, they're just not growing like they once were. And if we did invite more women into the game, it would, liven up things and of course get the numbers to, be increased. So I think it's some interesting and valid points you're bringing out.
Yeah,
So,
and the one thing. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, out of interest for you guys, I mean, do you prefer playing the ladies' events? Like, is it more fun for you, or do you prefer playing? Because I know both of you've played a lot of poker. Is there a preference?
No, not really, but I do really enjoy ladies' events because I can see that lots of other women do prefer playing ladies' events. Mm-hmm. And it's like I just see the excitement that people have to just be among fellow women. So I just wholeheartedly support ladies' events. But for me, it's not really a preference. But one kind of plea that I'd like to make on this podcast, and I'm not only addressing for women in poker, but for anybody who is new to poker. My plea is to the people who are professionals that have played before, that know. My plea is just be welcoming. Like, treat people like you would want to treat your niece or your daughter or your sister if they are playing for the first time. Though, I just can't imagine that if it was someone that you loved playing for the first time, whether it's a woman or a man, that you would allow some people to like be impatient with them or roll your eyes or be anything but welcoming and kind to them. Like I just can't imagine that would be true. And so just imagine that that person is someone that you love, because has been something that I have noticed that has not gotten better. It's actually gotten worse over the past few years. That professional players and or semi pros, they don't understand that they are hurting the future of poker by being such impatient a-holes basically to new players or women or so like my plea is to just recognize that, as not only are you not being a good human or being someone that you would like anyone else to treat to any of your loved ones, but you're also just shooting yourself in the foot for the future of the game by making the environment unwelcoming for anybody who is new or a woman or anything like that.
Yeah, I kind of echo your sentiments. It is a very different experience when you go to the ladies' events. And now, obviously, I play almost always open events because there's not that many ladies' events, but it is a different experience when you play the ladies' events. And I think a lot of women, they feel very comfortable in that environment, but they wouldn't feel comfortable at all in an open environment. So they just don't go and play in open field events. And it's a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess my other thing too is if you are a woman and you are, haven't necessarily been comfortable playing in open events or whatever, my invitation to you would be recognize the fear and do it anyway, because that's in any area, obviously, it's like the only way that something uncomfortable does become comfortable. And if it's in line with your vision and eventually you want to, take a risk. And if anybody is being impatient with you, just request that they are, because you're learning. And yeah, I just want to really be an advocate for this specific piece of, women being invited to the game and new players invited to the game.
Yeah, I mean, it would make such a difference if people felt welcome. I mean, I think too many people get stuck on how many hands per hour they're going to be able to play, and they don't realize that fresh blood in the game is actually going to be far better for everyone financially in the long term than, perhaps playing an extra couple of hands an hour.
Yeah. But what's very interesting is it's some of the same people who tank. So.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
It makes the game unwelcoming, and it decreases the number of hands you get. So it makes no logical sense, but you see it all the time.
So Definitely. Watch out. Trisha's watching out for you at the tables, guys.
That's right. I've got a hot pink sand timer, and I'm like, I'm bringing it. And if anybody's tanking, you're going to see that timer come out. And that's just going to be that.
For sure. And like I love that you do that, Trish, and like I also feel like kind of the crusader for anybody who's new, and I'm like I want to come to the rescue for if any pro is or semi-pro or wannabe pro is being impatient or they're tanking or doing any of those things. And yeah, like we need more crusaders, more hot pink timers, or more people who are standing up for the newcomers, or or the wellness of the game. Speak up. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, and in terms of live, I mean, from what I've heard, it seems to still be pretty big, and the events are still large, aren't they? So I mean, although we're being slightly negative on the growth, I mean, certainly I've probably been going to the World Series for probably 5 years now, I guess, and it seems to be busier every year. I don't know if that might be just pattern recognition going a bit wrong there, but what do you guys think about that?
I think that live events, particularly the World Series and particularly like the WSOP circuit, one with lower buy-ins, are doing they're still very healthy. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason is that it is because of the things that we're talking about, which is inviting, women who can play these stakes, and the World Series, it is in general a very welcoming atmosphere. so I think those are doing really well. I think the places that are struggling are the high, there used to be 10Ks every other month, and they just don't survive, or haven't survived in the past few years. And so, yeah, those are the ones that are doing well, and it will be and continue to do well if we continue to be welcoming,
polite and friendly and good humans.
Yeah, definitely. Good humans.
Good
Be a good
humans.
human.
Be a good human. It's not that hard.
That's right.
So, Kristy, where can people find out about your podcast and your coaching you're offering and things like that?
Yeah, they can go to KristyArnett.com. That's KristyArnett.com. Or they can search for my podcast anywhere podcasts are available. It's being published, and you can search for Kristy Arnett or WTF am I doing with my life. And the same thing is true for any social media. And, the thing that I live my life for and am passionate about is that anything that we want to create in poker, playing poker for a living, playing higher stakes, finding the love of our lives, or a career that we are in love with, is possible. And it is the journey of figuring it out and pushing our limits, and being courageous in the face of fear. That's what life and the juice of life is all about. And if you are doing that with poker and you're pushing yourself in poker, I think that it's just going to help and support you in every other place of your life. And I'm sure you guys find that with the clients that you work on, that they're like, oh, I just took a risk and it's, changed the way I risk. And I asked this girl on a date too. It's all relatable. It's all the same thing. So yeah.
I'm sure me and Patricia couldn't agree with you more. Literally. That's on
right.
That point. Yeah. Poker is life.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And what I'll do is I'll make sure we have links to Kristy's sites and podcasts and things on the show page. So any of you guys want to check it out, check out the podcast page, and you can click through. So yeah, once again, Kristy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys do great work and make poker players' lives better. I love it.
Thank you.
It was really nice to have her on the show talking through that. It certainly sounds like quite the evolution she's going through over that decade of poker and now into sort of the podcasting and the life coaching side of things.
It's so interesting because when you hear her tell the story, it makes perfect sense, of how she kind of went from one thing to another. But I bet when she's looking at it, she's thinking, WTF, what am I doing?
She's having an adventure. That's what it is. Travel the world doing poker reporting and playing. I mean, it's an adventure, and it seems like she's found her place with the life coaching side of things. And I mean, I think really quite important the way she was talking about treating new players at the table. Mm-hmm. I think some really quite serious stuff. They're definitely things players should be aware of, because we've all seen it at the table. There's someone who's a bit slow because they don't know what they're doing, and they're counting their antes or whatever it is that's holding up the game. It's not a bad thing that they're there. I mean, that's
exactly. But another big takeaway that she talked a lot about had to do with the relationship to risk, and I thought that was pretty interesting too. Now, granted, she's more on the side of take risks, and a lot of times we're more on the side of don't take crazy risks. But I think if you can merge those and you're taking the right amount of risk, that's when you're going to get the best results. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a golden zone here. Quite clearly, you need to be pushing yourself through your career so that you don't stagnate. Unfortunately, as I say, the other side of that is lots of people take those sorts of quotes as I should jump into the highest stakes games I can possibly afford, and there's a big difference here. So something, have the rules that you set for your bankroll management, and then, the risk you should be taking should be all within the way you've decided to manage your bankroll. And then also, thinking about the level of players in the game and the reality of your edge. And, are you treating this session as I want to play in a game with great players, but I'm teaching it as a lesson, I'm looking to sit down and learn, or are you, stroking your ego and just trying to play some crazy poker that you shouldn't be playing? So I think, there's a lot there for players to think about.
And the vision aspect of it, which, as I mentioned when we were interviewing Kristy, I wrote about in Peak Poker Performance, but it's this idea that if you don't have a vision, you're going to, have the potential to get into situations. So get a vision and know where you're going and what you want, and then plan accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like turning up at the gym every day and picking a random exercise to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see many gains. If you know which day you've got legs day, chances are you'll be working your legs hard and you'll actually see improvements in it. And it's no different with poker.
If it's Wednesday, then I'll be doing my legs to go back to your statement.
Never skip legs day, as the memes say. Excellent. And where can people find out about your stuff, Trisha?
You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Trisha Cardner. I've got some new stuff that I'm putting out on peakpokermindset.com, including a free course on how to strategize for having a masterpiece year. So come on over and check that out. And yeah.
Awesome. And I'm as ever at pokermindcoach.com. So come buy lots of MP3s. And we shall see you soon.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Trisha Cardner. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.